What exactly is the blue chip ratio and why is that important? Find out next on today's episode of Locked On SMU.
You are Locked On SMU, your daily podcast on the SMU Mustangs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Oh, it's another week on Locked On SMU. Thank you for making us your first listen, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. My name is Grayson Singleton. Thank you for making us a part of your day as well. You've got a lot of choices out there, so I'm glad you're spending about half an hour with me. Our episode today, by the way, is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com/LockedOnCollege for 50% off your first year with Monarch Money. Coming up on today's show, you probably see that name right there, Spencer McLaughlin. You may not know who he is. He's the host of Locked On College here at the Locked On Podcast Network, also host of Locked On Ducks. He and I had a great conversation on the ACC and on Clemson's over-under win total that we talked about yesterday that was at 8.5. Don't worry, I went to bat for the Mustangs against a dude who is a little bit skeptical that SMU can repeat its season from last year. So you will not want to miss that one bit. That'll be coming up on the show, as well as something that you won't believe, and most people nationwide won't believe about SMU. So all that coming up on today's show. Let's start with this, though. The blue chip ratio. What is the blue chip ratio, and why is this important? Well, let's define what the blue chip ratio is. Because over the course of the last couple of decades, there is a ratio of blue chip prospects on the roster of national championship teams, and it's created some semblance of a baseline in terms of high school recruiting talent that you need to have in order to be in the national championship picture. So this guy for CBS Sports, he has done this. What percentage of your roster is blue chippers? Now, here are the qualifications for a blue chipper. A blue chipper is a 4- or 5-star recruit out of high school. Part of this metric goes into is roster building from high school. So transfers do not count in this. So you sign a transfer who was a 5-star at one point in time. Does not count to this. But what this is a measure of are dudes on your roster that are going to be potentially first or second round picks in the NFL. Because there's more 4- and 5-stars that are first, second round picks in the NFL than there are 2 and 3. So it's a nice little metric to basically see what percentage of your roster are going to be dudes that are going to play in the NFL. Now, this metric does have some pitfalls here because the baseline that is set here is 70%. Is if you get to 70% of your blue chip ratio, then you have the best chance to win a national championship. Now, over the last 14 years, only 8 of them have made that baseline. So it's not a perfect metric, but it is an interesting one. For instance, Michigan a couple of years ago won the national championship. Their blue chip ratio was 54%. Not inspiring. You'll find this surprisingly too. In 2019, you know what LSU's blue chip ratio was? 64%. Clemson the year before was 61 in 2018. So it's not perfect, but it is an interesting one. Now, I don't have SMU's in front of me. What I can tell you is that it's nowhere close to 70%. That I can tell you. But here's where I want to spin this conversation. Can SMU eventually get there or approach it? And that, to me, is an interesting question given the land of recruiting. Because last year, SMU signed more 4-stars in that recruiting class in 2025 than they had in God knows how long. You would have to go back really, really far to even get to that total. This year, SMU has, as we've talked about before on the show, 8 4-stars committed, 8 blue chippers. Now, the second part of this, because we haven't seen really any of these guys play, the 2025 class are going to be freshmen this year. The 2026 class will be seniors in high school and will get to campus after they finish their high school senior season. But if SMU can retain these dudes, Given where SMU is in the country, and we've talked about how important it is that SMU is in the DFW area, and they are the hometown team in one of the biggest, if not the biggest, college football factories in the country. Not to mention you're a slight 4-hour drive from Houston, which puts out a ton of talent. If SMU plays this right, they could get in this blue chip ratio conversation. I think so. Now, they've got to play it right in a couple of ways. Number one, they still have to succeed in building that proverbial fence around DFW. That has to happen. We have to admit that does have to happen. But also, the trickier part of college football roster building today is retention. A couple of years ago, really, let's just go back half a decade ago, retention was not as magnified as it is today because transferring was a lot harder. Transferring twice was not a good idea given the rules. But nowadays, it is a lot more loose. Now, there's part of the SCORE Act that's going to try to create a one-time transfer rule. We'll see how that ends up playing out. But retention is so paramount to the point where there are people in personnel offices in some programs, I kid you not, Oklahoma's one of them, that has in somebody's title Director of Player Retention. That is a real thing that is on the come up in college football. So you got to retain these dudes. But if they play their cards right and SMU continues to have success, like I think they will, you're going to hear more about that in the next segment. SMU's got a really good chance of being in that blue chip ratio. Now, the article does note that it is not the be-all, end-all of making the college football playoff. There were several teams, SMU notwithstanding, that made the 12-team college football playoff last year that had lower blue chip ratios. I think SMU on its roster last year of guys that they signed that were blue chippers had 2. One of them was the backup quarterback at that point, and the other was hurt. Preston Stone and RJ Maryland. So actually playing, you could probably chalk that up to a big fat 0. So it is doable without hitting that ratio. But given what SMU did, if SMU keeps its coach continuity and Rhett Lashley continues to be there and continues to hire good coordinators, because I think at some point, if SMU continues its success, they will lose coordinators. That is an inevitable part of football. You keep on a trajectory like this, you will lose coordinators. But if Rhett Lashley himself continues to be the standout head coach he is, and he continues to make good coordinator hires, SMU, I think, has a really good chance of being one of those blue chipper destinations. Let's just go back to where we are. Drew Evers, interior offensive lineman, 4-star from Flower Mound, chooses SMU over Oklahoma, a school that he had a lot of familiarity with because his older brother, Nick, played for Oklahoma at one point in time. He chose SMU over Oklahoma, Ohio State, and Penn State. Zach Turner he's 3-star. But Aldra Miles chose SMU over Oklahoma. Ja'Kai Anderson chose SMU over LSU after he was previously committed to LSU. You see the trend here. Blue chippers are coming, and it won't be too long before they start coming in droves if this level of success continues. So the blue chip ratio is a fun conversation of projecting who's going to be in the national championship mix. But SMU's got a blue chip coach. They're in a blue chip farm. And they've seemed like they're developing a blue chip reputation as a national championship contender. So that's where the blue chip ratio to me comes into play in this conversation, because if you're blue chip everywhere else, who's to say you can't get some blue chip players? And if you start getting those blue chip players, history will tell you that once you get into that 65 range, that's when you're really, really, really going to be on the precipice of national champions. All right, Coming up here, I want to get to this great conversation that I had with Locked On College and Locked On Ducks, Spencer McLaughlin. It's going to be a fun time where we talk about the ACC schedule. You'll see where he has SMU projected to finish the season and whether or not he and I think that SMU can get back to double-digit wins. Stay tuned. Locked On SMU. This episode today is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it certainly can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you can also build wealth. Was there a specific category like takeout or subscriptions that you maybe just lost track of? Well, I'll tell you this. With takeout and subscriptions, boy, that gets me all the time. I spend too much on food. I spend too much on Netflix and all the other streaming services. Some of them I don't even know that I'm paying for. Monarch Money can help you figure that out because Monarch Money can help you track your spending. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for half off your first year.
SMU 11-1 in 2024. How do they follow it up in this year's regular season? Our newest host here at the network, Grayson Singleton of Locked On SMU, is here to discuss that very thing. So here's how it goes down, Grayson. I give you my record prediction, and you, as the local expert on SNU, tell me, the national discusser person guy, how much of a fool I am. That's kind of how this game usually gets played. So we'll keep playing it that way. SMU's schedule is so much tougher than it was last year. And I was an advocate of them getting into the playoff. I will forever stand by that. I don't know how they're going to get back to the playoff this year because, man, you got two Big 12 opponents, which I think they should have. I want everyone to have 10 Power 4 non-conference or 10 Power 4 games on their schedule, whether that's 2 non-conference or 9 conference games and whatever. Get 10 on there. This is a tough schedule. You've got Miami, you go at Clemson, Syracuse is on there, TCU and Baylor for the in-state non-conference matchups. I do like SMU. I like Rhett Lashley. I like what they have coming back. I sit at 9-3 for a team that has a win total of 8.5. Do you think that is a fair prediction for the Mustangs?
I think it's fair. I don't think you're way off base with it, but I will say I would give them that 10th win. And the schedule shapes up pretty decently for them in a couple of regards. Number one, they get a scheduling break with the fact that they don't have to go to Syracuse, New York. I think that's a really big thing that they get that Syracuse game at home. The other scheduling break I think that they get is coming off of those back-to-back weeks on the East Coast when they play at Clemson and then at Wake Forest. They get Miami on the Hilltop in Dallas. So the fact that you don't have to go to Clemson and to Miami in the same season, I think shakes out well for you. Also, the back end of that schedule is really favorable for SMU. You're at Boston College. We don't expect much from the Eagles this year. Then you're home for Louisville. Could be interesting. Miller Moss coming over from USC certainly makes that intriguing. And then you're at Cal, who could very well be competing for the worst team in the conference.
Oh, hey, be nice to the Bears.
I mean, they lost their quarterback, and then Fernando Mendoza went to Indiana, and then they lost their best player, Jaden Ott, the running back that went to Oklahoma. So there's not really a whole lot coming back for a team in terms of star power, and for a team that wasn't really good last year anyway. The two Big 12 teams on the schedule, I think SMU can handle. They get the better of the two, who I think is Baylor. They get them at home as well. So the way the schedule just plays out on paper, I do see SMU getting back to double-digit wins. Now, do they lose both of those games to Clemson and Miami? Maybe. But there's not another game on that schedule that I look at and say I would expect SMU to lose that game.
I wouldn't either in ACC play. I think at Clemson is a loss because I am bullish on the Tigers this year. I haven't made my preseason national championship pick. Clemson is not going to be outside the top 3. I mean, Clemson, Penn State would probably be my top 2 going into the year. I don't know who I'll pick to win the title into
you like
this
Drew
season.
Aller a lot, don't you?
Well, I just like the fact that they have arguably the best coordinator tandem in the country. They took Jim Knowles from Ohio State. They have most of their team coming back. They were one drive from going to the national championship game. I think they're pretty good. Hot take.
Yeah.
Hot take.
Don't get me wrong. They're pretty good. They're pretty good. I don't know if I like the quarterback situation, though, but we get off topic.
Yeah, but there's no quarterback situation in college football I really know anything about. There are barely any. Kevin Jennings at SMU is one of them. That's one of the reasons I like the Mustangs, because this is a pretty difficult schedule. I'm glad you brought up the back 5 games, though, because this is a slate where you've got your 2 toughest opponents at home and 3 winnable games on the road. Now, going to Cal, I know a lot of people are down on Cal. And for our YouTube audience, I'll throw up my preseason ACC power rankings. Some people think I have Cal slotted too high at number 10. The reason I put them in that position is through all the years, and this is not exactly year 2 or 3 for Justin Wilcox, I believe it's year 9, he just finds a way to finish right smack dab in the middle. And I've got him just below the middle because they did lose a pretty good amount. I know people are, looking at him and saying, man, they could be towards the bottom of the conference this year. All they lost in the turnover. And I've just seen it too many times. He's just so established to be in that 5 to 6 win range. Their preseason win total is 5.5. That's about what it should be, even though they are in that spot. Grayson, that last regular season game for SMU at Cal, I'm just telling you, weird things happen in Berkeley. They just ask Miami last year. Ask Auburn the year before. Cal, of course, went into Auburn and won, different teams. But when you have a cross-country trip, in this New World ACC or the Big to any conference, anytime you're going 3 time zones backwards or forward, I don't care. I raise my hand and go, I think that could get really sneakily difficult. I don't know what Cal will be at that point. I think I have a good idea about SMU, but my initial instinct off the bat was to pick SMU under 8.5, but then I thought, no, I got to stick with my principles of when you return head coach, offensive coordinator, quarterback, I like you, because that's a rarity in college football.
Well, keep this in mind, too. They also returned the defensive coordinator. And when you are in a situation like SMU where you pop in a year, generally, some of those bigger schools come calling for your coordinators, and then you're having to replace them. The fact that you have head coach and both coordinators back, along with your quarterback, like you just stated, bodes very, very well. I want to back up for a second to that graphic that you just put up. Did you have SMU projected at 5?
I do. I do.
Okay, explain that, because behind Louisville and behind Georgia Tech, which I think Georgia Tech's a very interesting team in the ACC, but how do you have them falling so far?
So Georgia Tech is my favorite Power 4 conference dark horse to win a championship. And the reason is they have an incredibly veteran quarterback. They have a staff that I trust. They have a roster that is pretty darn good. And they have a very clear identity. And they were a good team last year. Not great, but they took the SEC champs on their home field to 8 overtimes. And that's not nothing. And I think that Georgia Tech has got the ability to finish in the top half of, or the top third rather, of the conference this year. Louisville has one of the most underrated coaches in the country in Jeff Brom. I've always been a Miller Moss fan. Did not think that he was the problem at USC. I think he was kind of a scapegoat for a situation that had some other underlying issues. But you look at Jeff Brom's track record with quarterbacks, it's very good. And Louisville last year was a good team. It's not that I'm down on SMU. I just don't think they're going to automatically get to double-digit wins the way they did a season ago. I think they got a little bit of a scheduling break, to be sure. They also, as you likely remember, Grayson, you have 50-50 games that can go either way. I don't know how they won that Duke game, man. I really don't. That was one that I looked at and went, boy, I don't know how you went. Now, BYU, I felt like they should have won by more, and that was just a weird, crazy game, and I give them credit for that. But I think that SMU's record was not inflated enough to the point where I think they shouldn't have been in the college football playoff, because I want results to matter above all else in the regular season. But I don't think there's not a big gap there in this graphic. I think my biggest cutoff line, frankly, is from Duke to Syracuse, because Syracuse doesn't have Kyle McCord. I do think Steve Angeli can be pretty solid for them, but that's kind of like the line between 1 through Clemson, I think, is head and shoulders above everybody else on paper going into this year. But
I would agree with that.
There's a bigger gap to me between my 6 and 7 teams, Duke and Syracuse, than Georgia Tech and SMU 4 and 5. I just like what the Yellow Jackets did, and I didn't feel like they yet popped. Whereas last year, I think a lot of things really went right for SMU.
I can agree with that too. And a lot of times those 50-50 games don't get duplicated. I do get that logic. Here's the thing, though. I'm putting a lot of stock when it comes to SMU in the fact that Kevin Jennings this year is coming into the season as the unquestioned starter. Because remember, he took over from Preston Stone early in the season.
Which I didn't understand at first. I was so bewildered. I was like, this Stone was good. What are we doing? And then I watched Jennings a little. I'm like, oh, okay, I see what we're doing here.
And then obviously Stone had to transfer out, ends up at Northwestern. But I think the fact that Kevin Jennings is going through an entire offseason as the unquestioned QB1 bodes well for him. And, obviously he's got to cut down the turnovers. I think there is progression that he can make in terms of processing information and whatnot. But going through the entire offseason as the dude that the coaches are paying the most attention to and giving you the most feedback, I think will bode well for him making those progressions that he seems like he needs to make. Even though Georgia Tech, I think, is interesting, we have to keep in mind about Georgia Tech. They lost their number one wide receiver last year in Eric Singleton. He went
True. The Rivers guy they brought in from FIU is at the very least interesting. I don't know if he's as good as Singleton, but the other reason, I hear that concern. My counterpoint is that Georgia Tech is not predicated on a passing game.
That is true. And by the way, neither is the success of their quarterback either. Haynes King is a pretty interesting kind of character because we know he's a solid quarterback. His raw numbers look pretty good. But is there a moment that you can really look back at Haynes King and be like, yep, that defines Haynes King? And I don't see that. And so
it was almost the Georgia game.
It was almost the Georgia game.
Almost.
But the operative word here is almost.
This is true.
So that's why I don't think Georgia Tech is better than an SMU team. For SMU, I think here's what you have to look at over the course of everything. 2 edge rushers coming back that are excellent. The wide receiver room is slated to be pretty good. Phil Steele had the wide receiver room as the second best wide receiver room in the ACC in his preseason poll.
I imagine behind Clemson.
Yes. Kevin Jennings coming back. The backfield is going to be interesting, I think, because you have to replace Brashard Smith. And it looks like so far that outside of redshirt freshman Derek McFall, they might be going with some sort of a committee approach. But the offensive line is still intact and it will be really good. And I think the defense that, remember, held its opponents 44 yards below their season averages when they played SMU, I think that translates. Maybe not to 44 yards, but I think something like that, some approximation of it, translates into 2025.
Real quick before I let you go, Grayson, and this has been great stuff as I expected, but the 2 Big 12 teams, TCU and Baylor, in-state matchups, I like it. Regional, non-conference battles, I'm totally here for it. I'm predicting SMU to split those 2 games. What do they need to do to go 2-0 against 2 teams that should be top half of the Big 12?
Play good defense. I think if they play good defense, especially if they get after the passer in both of those games against Sawyer Robinson and John Hoover, I think they'll be just fine. Because even
Josh Hoover.
Josh Hoover. Yes. Yeah. Thanks for the correction. But those 2, they're good quarterbacks. But are they spectacular? I don't think so. So they're good. No, don't get me wrong.
You're talking to one of the biggest Josh Hoover fans in college football, man. I'm
look.
Robertson. I'm with you. Like solid, good, capable. You could have a good season with him as we saw last year. I'm a Josh Hoover stan.
That's interesting to me because he hasn't blown me away yet, but he is still a good quarterback. So I think if they get after those 2 now, especially against TCU, because that game's in Fort Worth and not in Dallas where it was last year. But I think if they get after the passer in both those games, they should come out of those games 2-0. By the way, I love what you said at the top of this whole thing. I love 10 Power 4 games. I can't stand the way teams schedule.
It's awful.
Look, I'll give you one. I'll give you one of those games. And for SMU, they've got Texas A&M Commerce on the schedule. They also have Missouri State. Missouri State's a feisty FCS team, so I'm not going to dock you too much for that. But I love 10 Power 4 games.
Yes,
I love it. I'm glad I found somebody who agrees with me on that.
Oh, trust me,
it drives me nuts because I live in SEC country. My day job is covering the Oklahoma Sooners. Why in the hell do you have a random game in the middle of October against Maine? That makes no damn sense.
A potential new co-host here on Locked On College Football, Grayson Singleton, who sees the world the way that it should be seen. Locked On SMU. Check him out on YouTube wherever you get your podcast.
Final segment here on Locked On SMU. As a reminder, if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to this page. Go ahead and click that subscribe button. Turn on notifications so you can get updates and alerts on whenever we release content and when our daily shows premiere on YouTube, which is at 1 p.m., by the way. We premiere on YouTube at 1 p.m. every single day. Podcast is up early at 8 a.m. So you can listen to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts on your way to work. Okay. You won't believe this. There was an article released by Pete Nakos for On3 that was a result of a survey where we found out who has the most expensive college football roster for the 2025 year. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to tell you this. There is a notion around some parts of the country, including the part of the country where I live, which is in Oklahoma. There's a notion that SMU is getting ahead and getting all these recruits because they are outspending everybody. And while that won't factor into the 2025 year because a lot of the 2026 class, the entire 2026 class won't be there, there is this notion that, SMU got hot last year because they had an easy schedule and they paid a lot of money for people. Well, here's the findings of the survey in the 2025 season for who has the most expensive team. Number one, won't shock anybody, is Texas. Number two, if you're paying attention, it won't shock you, Texas Tech. Ohio State is 3, Oregon is 4, Texas A&M 5. Have we got a surprise yet? Probably not. Miami is also tied at 5 as well. Again, no surprise. A source told On3 that Carson Beck could be making up to $6 million this year. Michigan is 7. Tied with USC. 9 is Tennessee. 10 is Auburn. Okay, fine. You're not in the top 10. Great. But SMU, based on this reputation, right, should be, one of the ones that just missed the cut. Here are the ones that just missed the cut, according to this survey. LSU, Florida, Georgia, Ole Miss, Alabama, Penn State, Arizona State, Clemson, Florida State, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, South Carolina. SMU didn't even get a vote in this survey. Take that, all you people who think that SMU has just bought their way into relevancy. Now, look, is SMU going to spend money and spend some resources? Absolutely. You should if you have the resources. That's kind of how our society works. You should spend money to buy things and to pay people for services that you think their service is going to elevate your product. You absolutely should. But I think this notion almost spits in the face of what SMU's done. SMU has advantages. Don't get me wrong. SMU has a geographical advantage being in the hub that is Dallas-Fort Worth. It also has a geographical advantage and a legislative one because there's no state income tax in Texas. So that looks really, really attractive. Also, the no sales tax on groceries is a game changer too. As somebody who grew up in Texas and now lives in a state where there is a sales tax on groceries, boy, does that make some stuff more expensive. But aside from that, SMU has started to do well with its advantages. They're starting to win football games. They're creating an environment. People want to go see SMU play. And the fact that they made the move to the ACC cannot be understated because now you can say to the people who want to be in the primetime games, have the eyeballs of everybody, oh, you can do it here at SMU. You don't have to leave your home because people like Texas. Don't get me wrong. People like Texas. You don't have to leave your home to go be on marquee TV. You can do it just right here. And the fact that SMU can sell people on that is critical. Sure, they're going to spend their money. That's great. But you know what they're going to spend their money and also pitch to somebody? We got a damn good coach. We're in a damn good place with a pretty cool fan base. You can be a superstar in Dallas. And by the way, we're going to win some football games. And how do I know we're going to win some football games? Because in 1 year in the Power Four, we won 11. We played for a championship, fell just short, and we were one of the final 12 playing for a natty. How's that sound? Sound pretty cool to me. If I was to go back 5 years when I was just turning 18 and somebody came to me with that pitch and I didn't have to go far away from home, far away from my parents, my friends from high school, sound like a pretty cool sell to me. And that's what SMU has. So SMU is going to spend money. Don't get me wrong. But let's not let the national narrative fool us into thinking that, well, that's just all that SMU has. Nope, it is not. It's a little bit more detailed and deeper than that. All right, that'll do it for another week here on Locked On SMU. Be sure to check out the podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe to this YouTube page so you can be notified whenever we release new content, as we do every day at 1 p.m. Central Time. My name is Grayson Singleton. We will talk to you next week. Take it easy, everybody.